So this is a very interesting talk, especially from my point of view, because I've been working on this for a very, very long time. Although we are in 2020 right now, and the year is not so great, but the journey for me on QuickLens actually started many, many years back, almost in 2013. Actually, more specifically in May 2013. And at that time, I was working for a different company, not Sapient, and we were working on building an iOS and a web app. It was about creating a private equity network, something like Twitter for private equity investors. And some of the audience for that was used to be, very, very rich clients, things like Sultan of Brunei or people, who are royalty and, and things like that. And these people had very specific requirements about, how the interfaces should look like. And they really wanted to be pampered. And they had to, we had to redefine luxury for them on an interface, right? So there was very high fidelity of graphics, very high fidelity of videos and images, and the production value was extremely high. So we were actually, searching for tools at the time on, creating and making sure all our interfaces and stuff look really good. So, we obviously did all our research, and these are some of the tools we kind of, found on the market just to make sure the visuals look perfect. And although there were tons of tools, we were not quite happy with most of them. And primarily being, the fact that they were all having very bad UX. And also the fact that we ended up using multiple tools for doing very simple things like checking alignments and colors and making sure everything looked good according to the design. And this is the genesis, from where things actually started, right? For me, this is the place where the journey of QuickLens really begins. And this is where I also realized that I think we need a tool set which is more integrated and not distributed and fragmented like the ones I showed you earlier. And it was all about creating a tool set from the scratch. Now, obviously, I'm taking on a pretty big and very massive piece of work over here, and I didn't have any support as such from other people, right? And there were tons of things I didn't know anything about. For example, I didn't know anything about macOS, and this was a tool meant for the macOS, right? So I had no clue how to do macOS programming. And I didn't know anything about Objective-C or Swift or Xcode and a bunch of other things which is required for doing macOS development. And everything was brand new for me, like it was ground zero literally, right? But that itself was a good challenge. And I realized that I think this is something I can start learning, and it's good, right? I mean, just pick up something new all the while and not just keep doing what you're doing constantly. So I decided to kind of enter into this journey of creating this app and the tool. Now, not to forget that all of the tools that I showed you earlier are actually almost 11 years old, right? There were a lot of incumbents in this space, and they had been building such a tool for quite some time and quite popular also on the market. And here I was just a lone developer, doesn't know anything about macOS development and is picking on something massive like this. In fact, I didn't know that it was a massive engagement and an effort until I actually started doing it, right? So this is where the things begin, right? I want to get into QuickLens. But I also realized that I have learned quite a lot in the process, and this talk is more about sharing what I learned and what I think is necessary for building visual power tools, which are tools which are primarily meant for exploring things on the screen. So you guys, I'm Pavan Podila, and you can find me on all the regular social channels. So I won't go about talking much about myself. Let's just dive right into this. So as I said, the journey for QuickLens actually begins a little earlier, almost 7 years back. And I started in May 2013, but within a year or so, I got a rudimentary set of tools and stuff created, and I launched on the App Store in June 2014. Now, this year was actually, that 1 year that I spent on doing this was massive, and I had to go through a lot of things in terms of legal, making sure I'm not violating some rules and laws of App Store, going through multiple review sessions with the Mac App Store team, and so on and so forth. But the journey itself was met with a lot of roadblocks in between, but I learned quite a bit in the process. And the tool actually stayed on the App Store for about 2 years. And then in 2016, I was in the middle of moving back to India. I was staying in New York at the time, and a lot of things stalled literally. I didn't have much time to work on this, and I decided to kind of abandon this app for some time. But things changed, and this is what I'm going to talk about right now. That in 2019, in June 2019, Apple announced Swift UI. You guys probably know this at WWDC. And that was like an aha moment for me, where I realized that this is the framework which can help me kind of rebuild QuickLens from scratch and probably create a more superlative experience than what my audience was already used to. And that's what I decided to do. Just pick on Swift UI. Now, I had to start somewhere small and simple, right? And one of the apps that I had used a long time back was this flashlight app. And this was an app where you could actually move your mouse across the screen and get a similar kind of a flashlight effect. So you can focus on specific parts of the screen while you hide the rest of the screen. And that's exactly what I built as my first tool. So in fact, I'm going to show it to you right now. If you guys can see this. All right, let me bring it up. So this was a tool I built. This was, of course, it didn't look like this before a long time back, but this was exactly the flashlight experience. In fact, if you, let me just go back to the next slide and show you the real effect of flashlight, right? Now you can see that, this is a tool which I actually initially built, and it was actually quite simple at the time, and it was not as polished as what you see right now. But this allowed me to kind of, get to a state where I really understand Mac OS and how windowing works and how views work and how do you create full screen windows and things like that. And so this actually taught me a lot of things. And this was the beginning of QuickLens. So the first tool that I actually built in QuickLens was actually called Monocle. And this is a tool which you're seeing in front of you right now. It does a bunch of things. Like you can switch between shapes. You can switch between sizes. Of course, you can zoom in and out. And if you can, what I'm showing you over here is a photo by one of a very popular painter called James Gurney, and he paints real lifelike experiences on canvas. And you can see somewhere over here, if you guys can see it, it says over here, right, Gurney. So this was a tool which was kind of help me make it easy for me to kind of showcase what I'm doing. It also works very well for designers who are into the space and they want to kind of show off what they're doing and focus the attention of the audience on specific parts of the screen. Right, so you can dim the screen a little bit. You can also undim, and you can control the dimness as much as you want. You also toggle between the dimness, the shade, as I call it. Right, it was a nice tool to kind of get started with the whole process of building QuickLens. All right, now I want to actually focus back to the actual complete tool set and kind of take a step back and talk about what this tool is all about, and also what are the lessons I have learned in the process. And I want to anchor it around these 4 pillars, which is precision, speed, colors, and control. All right, so let's start with the first one. Now, when I'm building a visual power tool like QuickLens, precision is absolutely important, right? You want to make sure every pixel gets accounted, and what you're drawing on the screen is also extremely precise. And what I mean by that is something I'll just show it to you right now. Right, so here's one of the tools called Lens, and this allows you to zoom into any parts of your screen. So you can go in up to 64x and see how the tools look like. And I'm on a retina screen, so you can see that some pixels are actually, there are 4 subpixels per pixel, right? I don't know if you can see it over here, right? So I'm showing you a single block at the center, but there are actually 4 subpixels over here because it's a retina display, right? And this required preciseness, and I had to make sure the lines that I draw on the screen were also very, very precise. There's no anti-aliasing whatsoever, and every line has to be, absolutely pixel perfect, right? So let me show you a location where I just locked the screen for some time. So let me just unlock. Let's go to some part of the screen. Let's zoom out a little bit. And all of these tools, can be controlled by multiple things. So I'm just using my keyboard right now. So let me just focus on this thing over here and just lock my screen and zoom in a little bit. Now I'll also zoom in a little bit on my desktop itself. You can see that these lines are actually very, very precise, right? Every pixel gets accounted, and the bold pink line that you see over here is actually 1 pixel in width, and the other lines, the grid lines on the pixel grid itself, is actually half a pixel. I'm taking advantage of the fact that this is actually retina display, so I can actually draw half a pixel line, right? So it kind of makes it easy to draw very faint lines and show off the pixel grid without taking up too much of visual display, right? So you can do something like this over here. All right, so that's about this thing. Now, there are also times when, as a designer, you're kind of exploring the interface and you want to understand how big the size of your icons are, right? So you can do that by kind of going to specific parts of your screen. So let's say I want to measure the size of this icon on the menu bar. Now, if I move the mouse, obviously, then, I'll move away from that location. So I can also lock my mouse. So I'll just lock it, and you can see this lock icon over here. I can just lock it. And now I can do some quick pixel measurements right over here. And you can probably imagine what the size of this icon would be. 16 by 16. Yeah, that's a typical size of a menu bar icon. So I know for a fact that it's 16 by 16. Now I can use my keyboard controls and also slide across the menu bar and see if all the other icons are kind of fitting in that space. Yeah, this is centered in the 16 by 16 box. So kind of looks to be correct. And this is one way to explore interfaces. And that was one of the reasons why I built this tool, was to explore interfaces and see how other people have built and used the real estate that you have in front of you. So this is a very precise tool and kind of gets you exactly where you are. Now this particular icon is actually slightly bigger, right? The icons on the macOS menu bar can be up to 21 pixels in width. So this could probably be 21 pixels. So if I now center in that, then maybe it will be around 21 pixels. So precision was very important when I built this tool. And the precision can also be seen in other tools, like for example, the ruler tool, right? So this is a ruler, and let me just go back over here. So in ruler, you can actually measure vertical and horizontal distances. So here I'm seeing the horizontal distance. I can just flip my ruler and I can also do vertical distances. So this is good for measuring things very quickly and precisely, right? I can do that. Now you can also measure things at an angle. So I can actually rotate this ruler and bring it somewhere over here. And I can see that this is actually about 20 degrees. And I can snap my ruler by 5 degrees by holding the shift key. So I can snap it by 5 degree angles. So you can see this 5% pi slice is actually like 20 degrees in angle, which is kind of nice, right? So it's a good way to kind of explore what's on your screen very quickly. And this 7% slice is about 45 degrees. And if I just do a space bar, it snaps to 90 degrees. And you can see that this 13% is at the 90 degree angle. And I can also flip between things constantly. Now, a ruler is actually very precise, right? Because you're measuring at the pixel level. So obviously, every pixel matters, right? So if you zoom in a little bit, you can see that every pixel is exactly precise. It's very sharp, and there is no anti-aliasing whatsoever. And even when I'm drawing things at an angle, I try to ensure that these pixels are fairly accurate, right? So I'm actually doing some tricks over here to make sure the pixels come out extremely straight. And especially for the vertical and horizontal distances, it is critical that all these pixels are accounted for exactly the way they are. So that's about precision. And you see this in across the tools, right? It's not about just lens or ruler, but if you bring up the frame tool, for example, then the lines that you see over here are also very precise. There's never any anti-aliased line in the entire process. Even while I'm dragging things across the screen or moving things around and so on and so forth, you'll never see any anti-aliasing of any of these lines. And that requires special work on my part to kind of make sure every pixel is properly aligned. And there are some tricks for doing that, which I can share later, but you can see that in effect over here. And you can also, as a split between different grids, you can see that. You also see this in tools like the guides, for example. I don't know if you can see it over here, that the guide tool allows you to draw lines and guides, like Photoshop guides, on across the entire screen. So you kind of apply this idea across the board and see precision all over the place. All right, the next big thing for me was speed, and speed was absolutely crucial, right? I mean, you can't expect a tool to run very slow and then expect people to actually use it. And the speed actually became more critical in some places, like for example, the Crosshair tool, right? So this is a tool which allows you to kind of see the location of the mouse across the screen, and also draws this vertical and horizontal guidelines, so you can kind of see alignments of the various items on the screen and check for yourself, what's going on, and see if things are aligned properly or not. And we use this tool very extensively when we were actually developing it back in 2014, 2015, and kind of make sure that things are aligned on the web page and also on your simulator, and making sure things are not off by even by 1 pixel. So it was actually a very important tool at the time. Now, one of the modes in which the Crosshair operates is this real-time mode, which allows you to see the distances. So for example, I'll zoom in a little bit, you can see for yourself that it shows you the distance between elements on the screen. And here again, it's actually very, very precise. So you can see that that it matters what the pixel value is in terms of its hue. And I'm kind of zooming in really close over here. You can see for yourself that it draws a very precise and a sharp line, so it never gives you any bad value or a wrong value, right? So it was very important for me to make sure this is there. Now, this does a lot of image processing on the screen, as you can imagine, right? There is real-time image processing happening at 60 frames per second. And to achieve that kind of a frame rate, I could not have done this on the CPU. Because first of all, I'm on a retina display, so there are millions of pixels already to deal with. And on other kinds of displays, like for example, the iMac, which has like 5K pixels on it, resolution on it, it's even more difficult, and it makes sure that you have to ensure that you're not spending too much time on the CPU. Otherwise, the UI thread gets clogged, right? You guys all know this. The event loop can't be choked over here. So I had to move a lot of this load to the GPU. And for this kind of a real-time filtering, I had to create metal shaders, Metal is one of the shading language for macOS, which is specifically built for the Apple platforms. and it's absolutely beautiful. It's much better than the GLSL that I was used to earlier, and this allows you to run code on your 1024 cores, right? So you can actually get very, very precise, and I can play this on a video as well, and I can get like really precise lines over here, right? So I can move around the screen quite easily. Now there's one more mode in which the Crosshair operates, which is the bounding box. So I can simply drag a box on the screen, and it snaps to the smallest box around that particular element, right? So for example, let me say I'll drag a box around the follow button over here, and it's kind of 111 by 37 pixels, right? The same happens if I drag a box somewhere over here. It's also 111 by 37 pixels. So why don't we just keep track of what's going on, right? So I'll just press the enter key, and it holds the measurement on the screen. So I can just drag this, hold the measurement. Is there a follow button elsewhere? Yeah, there's one more over here. I'll put that. So you can see that all three buttons are actually 111 by 37 pixels. So you know for a fact, and also you're sure that what's rendered on the screen is exactly what you expect, right? And this is all you can measure right now. This wasn't there in the previous version of QuickLens, but now I added this. And this was actually a monumental effort. And although the tool looks very simple over here, it took me almost 4 months to build it, primarily because I was dealing with retina pixels, and there's lots of pixels to deal with, right? And my initial algorithms for doing this image processing was all on the CPU, and it was very, very slow. In fact, it used to take like about 3 to 4 seconds if I just drag a big box around this whole thing, right? So let's say I come back here and, let me pull that tool back. If I drag a box around this whole thing over here. Now, this, of course, is happening very quickly right now. It happens actually in 10 milliseconds. I even measured it. But previously, this particular thing used to take close to almost 3 to 4 seconds. That's a huge jump right now, right? And this happens because I actually run some of these core algorithms on the Metal compute itself, right? So GPU for Mac provides you the ability to run some computational algorithms on the GPU itself on all of your 1024 cores. So I wrote some compute shaders, which allows you to do this extremely fast. And man, I was blown away by the speed. Right, this was beautiful. I mean, I can drag across the screen, and I have near instantaneous snapping of my boxes, right? And I also animate the boxes because there's more time for me, right? I'm only using like about 7 to 8 milliseconds of my frame speed, so I have more time to actually do animations as well. So which is kind of cool and kind of gives a nice user experience overall. You can even take snapshots of this and copies to the clipboard, so you can paste it in your keynote slides or paste it in your Jira blog post or whatever it may be. So all of this actually mattered because and became easier to do because of speed. And the speed was achieved primarily by moving towards the Metal compute shaders on the GPU. All right, so moving along. The next big thing, in my opinion, was colors. And there's a little story over here I want to tell you. When I first started the tool, I didn't really have the notion of switching between various colors on the screen, right? So if I bring up a tool like, let's say, the ruler. So let me just bring that up, right? So this tool right now has this pink as its primary color, but I can also flip between multiple colors over here. So I can flip between pink, red, orange, and so on and so forth. And in fact, you can see all these colors if I bring up the tool palette. So you can see all the different colors you can probably switch between. So let me take one color, which is yellow, and go back to my, let's say, the Crosshair tool, right? I just showed it to you. Let's flip the mode. And now you can see that when I'm on a yellow background, the tool itself kind of blends in, right? Almost camouflages. So it makes it very difficult to read the information provided by the tool because you're on a background which is actually the same color as the tool itself, and which is a problem. So you had to create some kind of a way in which you can flip between different colors on the fly. So I can flip between the complementary colors. Like, for example, I can pick blue, which is a complementary color. So I can now stand out with high contrast on the screen itself. And this allows me to kind of now use this tool on a background, on a design which has that specific color, right? So that was very important aspect. So when you're building visual power tools where you're very focused on pixel exploration, it's really critical to understand that sometimes you will be on a background which is the same color as your tool, and it's required that you flip between colors very quickly. So I can actually use a keyboard shortcut and quickly flip between all my colors. In fact, I can do it so quickly, it's all happening at 60 frames per second, right? So I can do this on the fly. There's no need to go to some preferences window and click a color over there. I can select it from the color picker. That's all too boring and too slow, right? I need some things on the fly, and doing things on the fly with speed and by changing things constantly is the way you can build this kind of tools. So let's go back to that. And the last thing I want to kind of focus on is control. Now, by control, what I mean is that you have controls in multiple ways, right? You can use the keyboard, the trackpad, mouse, if you have scroll wheel mouse, or if you have other kinds of mice, like a trackball, for example. All of this will actually matter. And on the MacBook Pros, you also have the touch bar, right? So there's several forms in which you can actually apply controls on the screen. And these controls can be used simultaneously. So for example, if I bring up the lens tool, not the lens tool, let's say, let me take the monocle, right? One of my favorite tools and one of the tools that I built for a long time. I can actually zoom in from my touch bar very quickly, right? So I can zoom in and out, and I can kind of do things. I can go crazy right here over here. And let me also dim the screen a little more so I can see what I'm focusing on. So let's just focus on this thing for now. And I can zoom in very quickly. And I'm using my touch bar for now. I can also use my keyboard shortcuts. And you can see that there's a difference between using the keyboard shortcut and using the touch bar. There's more smoothness on the touch bar because I'm giving you a slider, right? I wish I could show you that over here, but it kind of gives you a nice way to control these things in multiple ways. And I can move this around with my mouse, use the touch bar to kind of control things by zooming in and out. Let me just come out of this, right? So I'm using my keyboard and my slider, and also using keyboard shortcuts to kind of flip between things, right? So you can see that I can do these things constantly, and I can actually have multiple planes in which I can control these tools. And all of this makes it very easy to use a tool, because at different times of the day, you could be probably having lunch and also playing with the tools, right? So at that time, you may not want to put your fingers and on the keyboard and do things. You may want to use the window controls to do it. Or sometimes you could be doing other things and you have one left hand free to do some of those things, right? So you want to kind of give control in multiple ways, so that different people can use it differently, and just makes it easier to kind of apply these actions in multiple planes. And there's also so many keyboard shortcuts that I'm kind of using, creating across these tools, that it's kind of sometimes hard to keep track of all the different keyboard shortcuts you have. So I created a mode where you can actually see all the keyboard shortcuts. So, and let me also switch the mode over here. Command Alt E, and then you can switch to the dark mode of the tools, and you can see that the keyboard shortcuts are of different kind now. And you can flip between different tools to see what these keyboard shortcuts are. There are more updates coming in the future, where you can even invoke an action right from the shortcut viewer, so that you can actually see what the keyboard shortcut actually does, right? And they've all been organized according to the different categories. And I gave it a nice keyboard-like look. So I'm kind of seeing a lot of keyboard shortcuts on other apps, where they simply show text, right? And text is too boring, frankly. And I'm an XT person, so obviously I want something fancy and luxurious, right? So I just recreated the whole keyboard look itself on the shortcut viewer. And this just makes it nicer, and you're kind of pampering the audience over here, right? Your user is going to spend a lot of time using these tools, so make them feel good, and also help them discover the things on the screen as much as possible, and making the whole experience very enjoyable, right? So there's animation sprinkled all over the place, and there are tons of places in which you can apply and see these animations, and it kind of elevates the whole experience in general, right? So you can see you can have preferences. You can also set up global hotkeys, so you can actually call them from any point on the screen, and so you have controls in multiple planes, right? So yeah, global hotkeys, keyboard, touch bar, mouse, and so on and so forth, right? And so there are multiple ways in which you can control these tools. All right, so that was all about the four big pillars. So when you're building visual power tools, it's very important to adhere to these pillars and make sure you're catering to all of this in some way or the other. Precision is absolutely critical because you're measuring pixels on the screen. Speed is critical because if you don't have speed, obviously people aren't going to stick with you for too long. And switch between various colors because you don't know what designs on which your tools will be applied and used. So we have to make sure you're the ability to flip between different designs and colors on the fly. And in colors, the dark mode is very popular these days, right? So let me bring up one of the tools called Ruler. Let me also bring up, let's say, the lens tool, right? So these tools, by default, they start off with the light mode, but I can also flip between the dark modes on the fly, right? And it animates these changes pretty nicely. So you can see, that you're in light mode or dark mode. It's not dependent on your system setting. You can actually use keyboard shortcuts to flip between them on the fly. So you're not restricted, right? You could have the mood for a dark mode right now, and maybe a light mode in 5 minutes, right? So you don't have to go back to the preferences and change things all the time. You can just do it with keyboard shortcuts. All right. Now, although I talked about the tool and what you can do for building the various tools and visual power tools in general, there are a few other lessons that I learned in which I think are very important, and I want to kind of share a few minutes on that as well. The big one was that when you're building a product, you have a lot of forces to contend with, right? You have internal forces where you have your own urges and gut feelings about how you should be building the tool. But when you show it to your audience, you realize that they also have different kinds of inputs, right? So you're supposed to take inputs from all kinds of places, but go with your instinctive feelings about what the tool should be built. And it's almost like blowing a bubble, right? When you blow a bubble, you have to be careful about how much force you apply, how much air you blow into it, so that it just becomes the right size but doesn't break and burst, right? So building a product is like building a bubble, or blowing a bubble rather. You have to carefully balance the forces from the inside and the outside. It's almost like matching the surface tension of the bubble itself, and just to make sure that everything is catered to. So don't rely just on your own instincts, but also take feedback from the audience. Give multiple demos, because obviously the demo gods can help you steer you in a completely different direction and help you learn a lot about your tool. The second big thing is about interaction design. And interaction design is something we as the XT community talk a lot, but when you're building tools for the masses, you realize that it's actually extremely difficult. And a lot of things you would like to do to improve the experience of the end user, especially when they're using this quite frequently, and they're doing it on a very, very specific tasks. So, and it takes a lot of effort to kind of, dogfood your own tools constantly. I've been dogfooding this for like 7 years now, right? I'm a primary audience for this particular tool, and I'm a primary user as well. So whatever feeling I have about the tool, I try to put it as an experiential element into the tool itself, right? So, and I give demos to a lot of UX people around me, and it takes time to kind of get the interaction right. Just the animations, how the whole experience should be, what the things should look like, all of it takes a lot of time. And this tool wasn't built in a short time, right? This version that you see right now took me 3 years to build, so you have the patience to build it. And go with your guts, and most of the time you should be right. The last thing I want to focus on is inertia. Now, when you're starting something new, like the way I did 7 years back, when I didn't know anything about macOS development, or Swift UI, or Swift, or Objective-C, or any of the other things which you have to learn, it's important that you stick to your guns, and make sure that you continue with the journey. The first step is always hard. But once you take the first few steps, you realize that things get easier and easier and easier, because now you have some momentum to carry you forward. And I would advise you to not give up on your momentum ever, right? And many times you would like to learn something new outside of what you're normally doing at work, but inertia is something that keeps you back. So don't have that inertia. Keep going and start learning new things. And when you don't know anything, that's actually the best position to start in, because now you have no inhibitions about how hard or easy it is, right? So go with your guts and just try out new things all the time. So for me, this was a tool in which I tried out new things, but I'm sure you'll find your own ways in which you can do it. Those are the 3 big lessons I have learned personally as a life lesson, more than the technical aspects, of course. So that's QuickLens for you. It's already live on the App Store. You can download it now, and I'll find a way if I can get some Sapien discount for it. I don't know if I can. I'm just a sole developer, right? So Apple doesn't give me any special ways in which I can sell my tool. But I'll see what I can do if I can give some kind of a Sapien discount. You can look at the app. You can take a look at the website. I made it as attractive as possible. I'm going on a full sales pitch at this point, right? But I think take a look at the tool. I think you'll find it useful. Thanks all. That's all, folks. Thank you.